on a break, I got a phone call from our group's leader. And she said, Margaret, I was just looking at the recording of our meditation today, and I heard Evan's voice. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, no, I recorded it. Here, listen to it. And this little voice did a little cough and went, Mommy. I was like, that is definitely Evan's voice. And so we did a little research, and our group decided it was an EVP, which is called an electronic voice phenomena.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. Margaret Meder's with us today. Margaret's one of my favorite people, and I know you're going to love her too. She's a high school choir director who learned how to use sound frequencies to communicate with her son in heaven. In addition, Margaret helps grieving parents and families find comfort in knowing their loved one's spirit is always around them. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go chat with Margaret. Margaret, I'm so thrilled to have you join us today. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Julie, I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, I told everybody before we got started that you're one of my favorite people on the planet and that they're all going to love you too. So no pressure here, girl.
No. Oh, that's so sweet. Well, I love you too. So this is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just get right into it. You communicate with your son, Evan, in heaven. Tell us about Evan and tell us how you communicate with him.
Okay, well, thank you so much for asking about Evan and letting me share a little bit about my beautiful son in spirit today. Communicating with him has evolved over the 11 years since he's passed. But let me just tell you a little bit about him. He was an incredible, just special baby who came out with Apert syndrome. And Apert syndrome is a cranial facial syndrome. It's very rare and complex. So if you've ever seen the movie Wonder, that little boy in there, Augie, had something very similar to what Evan had. And with Evan, what happened is that the bones in his head fused together. There's supposed to be 6 separate bones so that that brain can grow. But with Apert, they're fused together, so there's no place for the brain to grow. And then the other interesting thing about Apert is that their fingers and toes are fused together.
Oh, wow.
And there can be a lot of other complications. And with Evan, that meant like he had a narrowed windpipe and a curved spine. So basically, there's a 9-year treatment plan to correct all of those things with many, many surgeries. And when he was born, we had no idea that he was going to have any of these challenges. And that's very typical of children born with Apert, is that it's not detected before they're born.
And so how old was he when you realized that something wasn't right?
Well, immediately.
Okay.
When he was born, the doctor right away just whisked him away because it was obvious his fingers were fused and his head, like he already had some hydrocephalus forming because his skull wouldn't move to allow for the growth of brain. So, but despite all of those physical challenges, he grew with a very normal cognitive development. And just like a really, really bright kid. And so another thing that's typical of these Apert kids is that they're very bright and enthusiastic and just sweet little charmers. They are just like the most charming children you would ever meet. And they just kind of pull you in. So, and he never complained about all these major surgeries he was going to have. He had all his fingers and toes separated and then multiple cranial surgeries. Never complained once. And, did all the typical kid things. He learned how to swim and he played baseball with the Miracle League. And he had a lot of friends who just absolutely adored him. But despite all of the best treatment we could give him, he did not survive his final surgery.
And so
Yeah.
how old was he when he passed?
So he was 9 when he passed. So we had him for 9 years, and he inspired so many people. One of my favorite stories is last year, his class from 2nd grade graduated. And he had this little troop of friends who kind of followed him around school. And they went to his memorial bench and took a picture on graduation day.
That makes me weepy. How sweet is that?
Oh, it's really amazing. Well, and he inspired me to write a book. So I wrote a book called Uncommon Beauty, Crisis Parenting from Day One. And it's a book of 100 essays on how to parent a medically fragile child. And actually, it won a lot of awards. It won 3 Midwest Review Book Awards and 2 Benjamin Franklin Silver Independent Publishing Awards. And one of those was the best new voice. And my love of writing is one way that I communicate with Evan, actually.
Tell us more about that. How do you communicate with Evan? What are the methodologies that you use, and how did you come upon them?
Well, like I said, it's been like an 11-year journey, evolution of how do I communicate with Evan. So when he first passed, it was almost like I was looking for him. Like I literally thought he was lost. Like I could still find him. But like the first day after he passed was the first time I heard from Evan or that I perceived hearing from him. And I was sitting next to the pool and my other son was swimming. And I was looking at the water and I sensed this presence and it felt like Evan. And so I heard him say, just look at the water, Mommy. Look at how the light plays on the water and just sit and don't even think. And I just knew that was Evan. It was like instantaneous when I felt his presence and I had this thought. And so then, a couple of weeks went along and I really didn't hear from him very much. And then one night I was up in the middle of the night and I was saying, Evan, why can't I hear you? Just let me hear you. And instantly I felt his presence and I heard, Mommy, I am going very, very fast and you are going very, very slow and we can connect. And later, I learned that from you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I learned later, I didn't know anything about communicating with spirit. But later I read in a book and I learned from you that when you're grieving, your vibration is very, very low.
Right.
And spirit is very, very high and very, very fast. And the two just don't really work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's hard to hear spirit.
Yeah. So everybody, Margaret's a graduate of my class, my angelic attendant training, and that's where we met. So that's what she's referring to. And I talk about that a lot, as you know, that especially in the early stages of grief, spirit vibrates at a really high level because it doesn't have the mass of a body to slow down the vibration. And when we're grieving, we're in a low vibration because it hurts. It feels terrible. And anything that feels bad is in a low vibration. And so how many times have you heard me say spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels? Because the vibration's too low. And
Right.
it's really true. Yeah. So what was the catalyst to get you to be able to kind of fine tune your receiver and be able to communicate with him?
Well, not too long after that moment, I discovered something called Jin Shinjutsu. And Jin Shinjutsu is an ancient form of healing, energy healing. And, by coincidence, there are no coincidences, I had a neighbor and a friend who was a Jin Shinjutsu practitioner. And so she, when I was grieving, gave me some treatments. But soon after that, I had shingles. Because as you know, that's like something stress will bring out in you.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty bad case. And she said, I need to give you a 5-day intensive, which meant she would give me 5 days of hour-long treatments. And every day I felt a little bit better. But on the 5th day, something really amazing happened while she was giving me the treatment. And it's a hands-on treatment. I'll tell you a little bit about Jin Shinjutsu in a moment. But I could feel like a figure eight of energy moving through my body. And I was just kind of lost in that moment of, wow, this feels so amazing. I can actually feel energy moving in my body. And then an image popped into my head of my great-grandfather, who was a surgeon in the Civil War.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I'm actually the daughter of 4 generations of surgeons. So anyways, he popped into my head and I had this thought, why are you here? You must think this is so silly. This friend of mine has her hands on different points of my body to cure my shingles. And just like instantly, I heard him say, why would I think this is silly? He said, you think this isn't real just because you can't see it? It's every bit as real as stitching someone up. He said, you can't see emotions and they're real. I was like, whoa, wow, what was that? And then the energy.
Had you seen him before? Had you seen your grandfather's spirit before, or had you heard from him before?
No, never.
How long had he been gone?
I mean, he was a surgeon in the Civil War, so I don't even know when he died, but I think it was in the early 1900s.
Oh, you said that. That's right. So you never met him.
I had just seen a big portrait of him that hung over our piano. And so I knew who he was.
All right.
I knew all the stories about him, but I had never met him or heard his voice. And so then the energy subsided and my pain was completely gone. The exhaustion was gone. And I could move around. And I just thought, I would never think of these words, stitching someone up, but that sounds like something that someone from the Civil War would say.
Or they say it today. I got to close. I got to stitch them up. Yeah.
So whatever that was, I thought, okay, that changed my perspective. And what I learned that we call that a spiritually transforming experience, an STE. And that was my first STE where I was like, wow, there is a greater reality than I've ever been aware of before. And I want to find out more about it because it's very interesting. And it just opened up my eyes. So I told my friend, I said, yes, I want to take these classes. And she was a national organizer. So she would bring in these great teachers into our town. And I got certified for Jin Shinjutsu.
Oh my goodness. Well, so then what was the rest of your path up until now? How did you just think, okay, I need to find out more about this stuff? And then you were just led to something else and something else?
Yes. So part of this is you give yourself self-help. You can, like, for instance, if I want to be closer to spirit, I can place my hand on they're called your 13s. They're 26 energy safety energy locks. And you listen for the pulse and you get really in tune with the energy and you can feel it growing and subsiding. So I was practicing this and using it as meditation. Well, at the same time, I met Suzanne Giesemann. And I was in a lot of her classes. And she said, what, how about some of you just form a meditation group and you just work together? So she placed me in one of these groups of 9 people. And they were just the most lovely people. A lot of us had lost children, and a lot of them had spiritually transforming experiences. So we started meditating and doing healing meditations and practicing and laughing, having just like a lot of fun, like really raising our vibrations up. Well, one day I was actually not there for this particular meditation. I was actually at a workshop with Suzanne. But on a break, I got a phone call from our group's leader. And she said, Margaret, I was just looking at the recording of our meditation today, and I heard Evan's voice. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? She's like, no, I recorded it. Here, listen to it. And this little voice did a little cough and went, Mommy. I was like, that is definitely Evan's voice. How? But everybody else was completely silent. I mean, they were deep in the silence of this meditation. And this little voice came through, and I just like, I have no idea what this is. And so we did a little research, and our group decided it was an EVP, which is called an electronic voice phenomena.
Which is what? To explain to everybody what that is.
I mean, this is part of my evolution where my perspective had to shift. But my thinking was, well, if there's a God, and if there's a heaven, and if Evan's an angel, and he's like bringing me cardinals, and he's like watching over me, all these things that people had ever told me, I thought, well, who's to say his voice couldn't come across in a message? But what the EVP is if you have an electronic recording device and you have some background sound and you just have it playing, there's a possibility that spirit could leave a message on that recording.
So a background or a playing a recording device like a tape recorder, like an old-fashioned tape recorder?
That's how it started, Julie.
Okay.
That's how it started. In 1959, Friedrich Jurgensen, a Swedish man, actually, he loved birds. He totally stumbled upon this. And he had this tape recorder, which, was kind of a new thing there. And he thought, hey, I can go out into the woods and I can tape the birds, and then the bird calls, and then I can listen to them in depth and figure out what their calls mean. And maybe there's a bird I don't even know about that's out there. And I'm going to really use this tape recorder to study the bird calls. Well, what happened is he went back and listened, and there were voices on this recording, but he was the only one in the woods. So he had an experience like I did, like, what is this? But he was like the first one. So he had some friends who were scientists, and they started studying these things, and they're the ones who named it EVP.
So can anybody do it, or do you have to have like an EVP professional do it?
One thing, because this happened to me, I did a lot of research. And one person that I've done a lot of research with is Sonia Rinaldi, and she's one of the world famous researchers into this.
She's been on the show. I've had her on the show. Yeah.
And, she's a very high vibration. And I think what I've learned from her research and other research is like, you have to be in the right mind space to do this. I do a lot of prayer and meditation when these things are happening. It also takes a very special ear. Like, it's very hard to hear these things sometimes. And I think because I'm a musician, I can hear them a little bit better. So I would say, well, for instance, in our group, when we first learned about it, we did some research and like, oh, you can do it with a dictaphone. So let's do an experiment. Let's all take our dictaphones this week and walk around the house and see what happens. Nothing happened for any of us. Like, well, you can do it with your cell phone too. So for a week, we all walked around the house with our cell phones. Nothing. And then we were, Sherry Pearl, who is another famous teacher, has guidelines on her website of how to do it with a computer. So then, okay, well, we're all going to figure out how to do this with our computer. And I was the only one who got through one message.
And what was the message?
And the message was, your kids are here to help you.
Oh. And you heard that on a voice on the recording?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the Zoom sessions where we would occasionally get a voice, they were usually our children saying, hi, Mom, which is really cool. But this is a really like expansive experience. Like, you have to be open to, well, how far does my belief go? Yeah.
I know. When you first told me about this, and I don't remember how we got introduced. Do you remember that story? Can you refresh my memory?
I know how we got introduced.
Yeah.
You were on Suzanne Gieseman's show.
Okay.
And I heard you talking. I was like, oh, I want to talk to her. So I had a session with you, and then I learned about your angelic training. angelic attendant training, and then I took that training.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And that ramped up your skills even more
oh
as far
gosh.
as
Oh yeah. Yes, definitely.
in what way?
Well, you work with a group so much about raising your vibration and then just connecting with spirit. It's intention. It's intention. I don't know if you remember this, but we did an exercise to connecting with spirit. And you said, pick anyone, pick someone fun. And I picked Samuel Morse because he is a distant ancestor of mine. And he actually came through with some messages.
I don't remember that. What did he say?
Something like, I said something like, hello, Samuel, you're my distant ancestor, Samuel Morse. And he said something like, I am here, though our distance be. Yeah.
Like they would have talked back then, whenever he lived. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever hear the story about one of our graduates? He's a brilliant, like mathematician kind of a guy. His name's Don.
Oh yeah.
And you know how Don is. These guys like brilliant, off the chart. And he wanted to talk to Einstein to help him figure out some algorithm of some math problem that was way above my pay grade. Math is not my forte. And we all in the class were able to watch him have a conversation with Albert Einstein. And he was writing stuff down. He was talking out loud, and they were doing some kind of mathematical computations. And he got the answer that he needed. And we all in the class, because, we do with the practicum part, the practice part, and we were all like you, we're all like, holy criminy, this is amazing, because it was very detailed as far as what was happening. Speaking of that training, we had a graduate who decided to end her life with they call it the Death with Dignity pill, that I believe has been approved. I think it's up to 11 or 12 states now for somebody who's terminally ill and there's just really no hope, and they're in agony and they're just ready to go.
Right.
And her name was Lisa. And so we had kind of an impromptu wake, really, while she was still alive, the day before she ended her life with this medicine. That for those of you that aren't familiar with it, you got to get it approved by a couple of doctors, and it's all completely legal, and and all this other stuff. I always think of Dr. Kevorkian, and how he helped people that were just in agony at the end of their lives. And he spent so much time in prison, but God love him, God bless him. He was the one that really was bringing this to the forefront. Anyways, back to Lisa. So how many did we have on that Zoom? Probably 50 people. Easy. 50 graduates. And we all came together and we talked with Lisa and we told her how much she meant to us and all of that. And then Johanna or CB or one of them said, one of the graduates said, let us know when you get to heaven. And she said, okay, I will. So then we get the note from her daughter, then we spread it amongst, all the graduates. Okay, she's passed. And I think she was going to take the medicine at noon the next day or something. So pick up the story where that leaves off.
Yeah, well, Johanna, one of your other students, she said, Margaret, we want to make sure that Lisa made it, because Lisa is a dear friend. Like, for us, we traveled that journey with her for a long time.
Yeah, she had brain cancer that had metastasized.
That battle so much. So I don't typically do this for other people, but I said, okay, I'll just see if I can get something. And they were some of the clearest messages that I've ever gotten.
So did you ask Lisa a question? How did you get her response?
I mean, I said a prayer and I just said, Lisa, this is Margaret. Did you make it to heaven? And I got the replies, yes, here I am. And then Margaret connects with me. Yes, I made it. Yes, here I am, Margaret.
Yeah. And it was because you played it for all of us and it was in her voice. I mean, we could hear her voice. It was her accent. It was her syntax of how she said words together. It was amazing. And you got that, what, like a couple hours after she died?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
There are schools of thought that people, once they pass, that their spirits can't communicate for a certain amount of time, like 40 days or whatever. And that has not been my experience. As you know, we all can communicate with spirit, whether it's attached to a body or not. And in the 12 phases of transition, which is what happens as somebody's dying with the angels and the deceased loved ones and all that, we're communicating with that dying person's spirit the whole time. So I think your recording of Lisa's voice was validation. I mean, she had passed a couple of hours before that, and here she is talking to you and leaving you messages on your recorder.
Right.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that for all of us. And it is so healing to be able to hear that, not only hear that she's there in heaven, but also to just hear her voice and to know, okay, yeah, this stuff's real. I mean, I know it's real, you know it's real, but for people that need some more validation, that's a good way to be able to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for doing that for
Yeah.
all of us. Have there been other ways in which you've communicated with Evan or other deceased loved ones, maybe just telepathically without the recording? Are there other methodologies that you use?
Yeah, definitely. More than anything, I like to write. So I do what's called inspired writing. And it's part of my meditation where I will do a whole meditation and then I just pick up the pencil, and if I want to talk to Evan, I'll just say, good morning, Evan, I love you. And any thoughts that come to my head, I'll just write down, and then I'll look back at it and I realize, wow, those are really interesting thoughts. And sometimes it's just a really great feeling of presence and love.
Yeah. So does he say, hi, mommy, here's what I'm doing in heaven today? Or how does he respond? What does he say?
I wish it was that specific, but usually it's just, I love you. And sometimes there'll be like a word like paint. And then I've got to kind of put my own spin on what that means. And I think that's where the intuition comes in, where something outside of myself is really filling in the blank, like paint the day. Like, don't just sit around and do the same old, but put something extra special in it and paint the day. That was one of my favorite ones. And then, or sometimes it'll be something like the word reaffirm. And I'm like, And that might mean like reaffirm everything that's important to you today. So it's comes in forms of little messages. Usually it's one word, and then I will have to fill in what that means on a greater scheme.
Do you think he's putting the other parts of the meaning into your head? You'll hear a word, you'll write it, and then you have, paint the day. So he'll be adding paint the day, and you'll hear it in your mind, kind of like a thought. But do you think the thought is coming from him because you're on the Evan channel of frequency?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. And it's not so much that I'm hearing his voice, but just that I'm knowing a thought.
Yeah, I thought that's how it works. Yeah. That's how the thought comes in. Sometimes we'll hear a voice, but most of the time it's just a thought. And as you know, because you're a graduate of my class, our heads are big satellite dishes. So when you're thinking of him, you're on the Evan frequency. It's like there's a two-way radio that is open and you're able to communicate with him. Do you find, it's been my experience, let me put it that way, I find that people, when they first talk to a deceased loved one, will oftentimes expect some big philosophical or theological or some earth-shattering,
Yeah,
something that their loved one's going to tell them, and they'll come in with a word or a thought or an image or something that for me, if I'm working with you or working with another client or somebody calling into my show, won't mean anything to me, but 99.9% of the time it means something to the other person with whom I'm conversing. And so I try and remember to tell that to people when we're connecting with their loved ones. I would say, okay, they come in with this stuff that is seemingly random. And you'll
right.
think, really, this is the first time I'm talking to you since you died, and you're telling me, paint the wagon? And really, can't you give me some, life advice that's going to help me live a better life? And 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 yet paint the wagon makes sense because they had painted a wagon with their deceased loved one and it was the favorite wagon, and there'll be some bigger meaning. What do you think is going on with that? Why does spirit do that? Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah. I think part of it is uh, what I've come to realize is that to get any thought across is literally a miracle. So whatever thought they're going to get across, they want to get the most bang for the buck. So it might have multiple meanings. So it might be literally paint the wagon, like they had fun doing it, or paint the wagon, it's a validation. They did paint the wagon, or paint the wagon, like what more important thing is there to do in life than enjoy yourself doing those kinds of things
With loved ones.
with loved ones?
Yeah.
So it usually I find the messages have a lot of different meanings to them because they're trying to get the most out of, I mean, just think about how incredibly complex the process is. If you believe that spirit is communicating with us, you have to have a very intuitive person receiving and a very strong spirit sending and all this interference in between. So I do a lot of when I get these thoughts, I'll Google them and I'll try to find all the different meanings of this word that'll kind of open up different perspectives.
That's a really good piece of advice because, well, I'll have somebody in heaven, show me purple violets or a daisy or uh, a 55 Chevy, and I'll think, okay. And I'll say, they're showing me purple violets. Does that mean anything to you? And they'll say, yeah, that was my mom's favorite flower. And that's who we're talking to, the mom's spirit in heaven. And then, like you, what we'll do is we'll look up what's the spiritual meaning of purple violets. And there'll be all these things, and it will describe either the person or describe some kind of a message that resonates with my client.
I'm really glad you said that because it reminded me of something that happened to me recently. One of my dear friends, her husband had Alzheimer's, and the night that he passed, I was on the phone with her because the hospice nurse couldn't get there. And he came into me very strongly. And after that, she'd call me and she'd say, do you have any message at all? Just anything, like anything to just help her. And I was like, okay, I'll try. I can't, really can't do this on command, but I'll just see. So I thought, and the word argyle came to me. Like I said, like you get a word like argyle. And I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous.
Like argyle socks?
Yeah. And so I said, okay, listen, I'm sorry. This is all I could get is argyle. And she said, well, he didn't have any argyle. What are you talking about? I said, well, let's do this. My teachers have told me, just hold on to it. It might make sense later.
Right.
So the next morning I woke up and there was an ad that popped up on my phone for this new movie, Argyle.
Oh.
And then everywhere I sing Argyle, I thought, wait, I need to Google this word. What does Argyle mean? Argyle is an intertwined pattern of diamonds. What's the spiritual meaning of diamond? eternal love. So she kind of took that, and I kind of took it. I'm like, that's a really cool way. He's saying is, okay. So fast forward a month later, we're at his memorial service, and she told this story actually at the memorial service. And I went out into the atrium to look at the pictures. And lo and behold, there's a picture of a group of people standing together. Everybody has on a plain shirt except for one person, her husband, who has on an Argyle sweater.
Oh, wow.
And so
I have goosebumps on that one. Yeah.
Isn't it, could it be a coincidence? Maybe. But there's a thing where multiple things were happening. Argyle means, diamonds of everlasting love. And I'm going to validate it later by having this picture where I have an Argyle sweater on that. And see, this was a second marriage. She had never even seen this picture before.
Oh my gosh. So he was sending her that sign so that she could see that and have you help her notice it. When you said diamonds are the symbol of everlasting love, I'm thinking, I thought De Beers made that up. The guys that mine the diamonds.
Well, you Google it, that's what they say.
And they are the ones that are the diamond distributors, for diamond wedding rings and all that. Although diamond rings were not a thing before, I think it was the early 20th century. I think we didn't see diamond engagement rings. We saw different other stones, and all of them have a meaning. I was talking with a client recently, and her deceased mom in heaven, and the mom said, I want you to pray to Saint Therese, the little flower. And I'd heard of Saint Therese, but I didn't know what she was known for. So we looked it up while we were still on the phone together. Well, it turns out she was French, and the little flower, and there was lots of symbolism with that. And my client started laughing, and I said, what? And she said, well, my mom was French, and she was a floral designer for a florist. She was a flower designer. So she goes, so of course she's going to tell me to pray to a French saint that likes flowers. And, stuff like that. And it makes it so fun. I find, too, that often spirit, and I'd love to hear your take on this, spirit will say something that will be funny or will make their loved ones who are grieving, it'll make them laugh. Yeah. And again, they're looking for some, life-shattering guidance, and they're saying something that's like purple pigs or something that doesn't mean anything to me. Right. But it means something to them, and it gets them laughing. Have you found that to be the case as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Why is that?
I think they're just trying to lift our spirits.
Yeah. Do you think that they suffer in heaven, or they have any negative emotions in heaven, or is everything just all, unicorns and butterflies and happiness and joy and love and all of that?
I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that every intuition and message that I've ever gotten from Evan, every dream visit, every word, that I've written down, every feeling that I've had has always been very good. Like, he's having fun. He's busy.
Does he tell you what he's doing?
In one of his dream visits, he came out and he says, Mom, I've been so busy. I've been at school learning. And could that have been just a dream? Yes. But that is the overall impression that I have, that there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to do. And he was busy in life, and I'm sure he's busy in heaven.
Yeah. What's a dream vision?
Well, when I was a little girl, I started having dream visits. For instance, my grandpa, who I knew had passed away, visited me in a dream. And I saw him dancing in a room, and I kind of weaved through these people in the dream to look at him. And he just said, I'm having so much fun dancing. And when I woke up, I was about 12. I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I dreamt about Grandpa last night. He had just died like a week earlier. And I said, he was dancing. And he said, he's having so much fun. And she went, like, you don't mean it. when he was a young man, and he was a young man in the early 1900s, because I'm the youngest of the youngest. So my grandpa was born in 1880, if you can believe it. But she said when he was a young man, he was kicked out of the church for doing social dancing.
Oh. Oh.
And we're like, well, this is amazing. He can dance in heaven and he's having fun. So maybe there actually wasn't anything wrong with social dancing.
No, never was, never will be. I mean, my gosh, every civilization has dancing in them. And it's just it was the Puritans, right? They were the ones that wanted the people not to have any music or dancing. But that's all that control nonsense, control the masses with fear kind of a thing. Let's switch directions for a minute. You're a music teacher and a choir director at the high school level, right? And
Right.
I know your choirs compete and you do these big shows and stuff like that. Sometime I'm going to surprise you. I might fly up there and come to one of
Oh,
them.
good.
So you have a basic understanding of musical frequencies. Do you think your background in being a choir director and also a musician, tell us about that. Do you think that that was part of your path to prepare you for these sound frequencies and being able to communicate with heaven and other spirits?
I do think so on some level. I mean, first and foremost, the biggest skill in being a musician is being a good listener.
Ooh, why?
Because you have to listen so closely to everything you are doing to make sure that you're in tune. And just the sensitivity of the phrasing, you can only know that by listening. You really, really have to listen. That is the number one skill. And so when you spend years practicing at the piano or singing, by yourself listening, you kind of develop this sense of perception that is unique. And I think that's probably the number one biggest thing that has helped me along with this journey. That and just being a person who meditates and feels a strong connection to spirit and God.
How does being able to listen and listen to the phraseology, is that a word? And the musical notes and all that kind of stuff. How does that translate into spirit communication? How does that relate? I missed that point.
Well, spirit is the sender, we're the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the whole antenna idea. And so you may be listening with your ears, but you also may be listening with your mind. And it's kind of one and the same, that in order to receive those messages, you have to be open to listening for them.
And so when you're conducting your choirs, do you believe that you're plugged in kind of to spirit and spirit sending you guidance of how to not only guide, for lack of a better word, guide your kids into the different parts of the piece that you're performing? And this just came into my head too. And do you think that it's spirit that's leading you to certain pieces that you're going to choose to perform in that year with that group of kids?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I love all those thoughts. I mean, I'm sure that all has something to do with it. I do think that it's when you're conducting, it's a very left brain, right brain thing. Like it's very analytical, but you also have to be super creative to bring out the possibilities. So it's that left brain, right brain thing. But I also think there's got to be something outside of ourselves that we're also bringing to it.
Yeah. We have a graduate of angelic attendant training who's an orchestra conductor, Kathy. I don't know that you've met her yet, but you'll meet her when you come to Atlanta. Margaret's she's going to be a graduate volunteer at our class in Atlanta in November 1st through the 3rd. Kathy will be there too. And I haven't asked her that question yet, but I'm gonna. So I'm eager to get you two together because you're both conductors. Certainly she's, conducting the instruments and the orchestra, and you're conducting the instruments that are the voices in your kids. So it's gotta be one and the same, I would think.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see the similarities that you guys have and how you're inspired by spirit.
Oh, very. I can't wait
do that.
Hear. How fun.
Yeah. How do you pick the pieces how do you choose the pieces? Do you choose different ones each year?
Yep. Every year we kind of start from scratch. And, it's a whole bunch of different things, but you look for different moods. Like you want to have a variety of moods, a variety of tempos, a variety of like the text, so that students can grow in different ways. And our brains are always looking for something new. So it's interesting to kind of see the contrast between the pieces. And of course, you have to take into consideration who are the singers that I have this year.
Right.
And my top choir does almost 100% a cappella.
Oh, wow.
So, it's very fun.
How big is your school?
Our school is about 600.
Okay. So that's a good size school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get that. When my son, Jonathan, we both have a Jonathan, so we share that. When my son, Jonathan, was a freshman in high school, he was in the choir all 4 years in high school, and they sang Poulenc's Gloria.
Well,
now, I've never heard of Poulenc before that time, and I didn't know he had a Gloria. However, during that concert, Tim and I, my husband and I, were sitting there and they're performing this, and they have this soloist who went on to have an opera career. I mean, she was in high school. She was a senior in high school at this point.
Yeah.
Because they have a soprano solo in Poulenc's Gloria. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to this and I have tears, Margaret, streaming down my face.
I bet.
And Tim's looking at me. He's like, what's the matter? What's wrong? I said, I don't know. And he said, why are you crying? And I said, I don't know. It's so beautiful. But it brought tears to my eyes. What the heck was happening with that?
Oh, well, that's what music is all about, right? It's all about emotion, and just that's what the composers are all about. What is the emotion that we can evoke from this? The performing group is delivering a message, and their goal is to make the audience feel something that they wouldn't normally feel. It's that elevated emotions, elevated perception, elevated experience, our senses, just everything. That's amazing that a high school choir could evoke that response in you. And that's really amazing and wonderful to hear.
I don't know that had ever happened before at a concert. And certainly I've been to many concerts with many professionals, and I go to the symphony and you got the symphonic choir that sings with them, like Handel's Messiah and the Requiem and, all that kind of stuff. But I'd never had that happen before.
Poulenc uses very interesting harmonies and unexpected chords that really kind of catch our breath. Yeah.
Interesting. Along those lines, I want to talk to you a little bit about the different frequencies in music. This fascinates me.
Yeah.
When we talk about the frequencies and certainly the solfeggio frequencies, and I want you to explain what that is, but it's 528 hertz. I looked this up.
Right.
And I didn't know this off the top, but I looked it up. Beethoven, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, Bach, Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue is in the solfeggio frequencies.
Uh-huh.
And it's been shown in clinical studies that the solfeggio frequencies lower blood pressure, they lower heart rate, they help dispel depression and anxiety. Talk to us about that. What's going on with that? Talk to us about those frequencies, why these classic composers were doing this. And art, I love Broadway. So, and I know you guys do show
Yeah.
tunes. You pick
Yeah.
show tunes. I don't see that much of that in the show tunes. What is the difference? What's going on there?
Well, the mood is very different in classical music than it is in show music. But I would say all those things that you said really pertain to classical music. It has a very profound effect. And a lot of it just has to do with the tempo and the harmony and the complexity of the chord progressions. I'm not sure that the composers of that time really knew about the solfeggio concept.
I think it was all channeled.
No.
It's all channeled. Every composer is channeled.
That music, and not just Western music, but Eastern music as well, and all kinds of multicultural music, really, their whole thing has been, let's evoke some emotional response. And they just, knew what those devices were to do that. And it's a different purpose maybe than the Broadway musicals. But, people come out of those just real happy and energetic and moved by the story. So it's a different device, but with some of the same results.
Well, and I, being a Broadway music fan, I can have a Broadway, I can have like a John Williams does Broadway. I used to love, my favorite concert of the year was when John Williams, when I lived in LA, when he would be at the Hollywood Bowl and he'd play all of his movie themes and show tunes and stuff like that. And it's so interesting that even the music of today, we can have different emotional feelings. What is it about the music that triggers our emotion? Is it the frequency? Is it that, because a lot of it we haven't even heard before. I tease my Jonathan and I say, you can't listen to disco without being in a good mood. Disco music. I mean, you just can't. And he laughs at me and I said, I dare you, listen to a couple of disco songs. You're going to be in a good mood. It raises your vibrational level, gives you more energy, helps you do that. What's going on with that?
One specific thing that I like to look at are intervals. And an interval is the distance between two notes. And so they kind of, Rudolf Steiner, who wrote a lot about music and spirituality, though, and just mood, how different intervals can evoke different responses. So like the minor six from Love Story, da 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 da. Da 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 da. You'll have to cut that out.
No, that was great. Yeah, I got the chills when you were singing it.
But that minor six really evokes a lot of emotional response, and that's why that was put in that song for the Love Story.
Oh.
And a lot of classical composers will use that interval.
When we think of music and how it can affect our bodies and our mood, I know that there have been studies done where music has been used, the frequencies of music have been used to help heal people in the hospital, in the nursing homes, in whatever situation. Have you looked into that at all? And how does music affect babies in particular? Case in point, back to Jonathan, when he was born, my mother and dad came out from Ohio. I was living in LA, and my mom brought, I still have it, she brought this music box that was inside a pillow. It was about, like maybe 4x6 or something like that. And it had cross-stitching of Beatrix Potter's Peter Rabbit on the cover. Like and it had eyelet around it. As I mentioned, I still have it. So I'd wind it up and it was, here comes Peter Cottontail, up and down the bunny trail. That baby, Margaret, when he was less than a day old, I had him home, had him at 3:30 in the afternoon. I was home at 9:00 the next morning because back then, in the early 90s, they didn't let you stay in the hospital.
Right.
And so he was a little fussy. I was changing his diaper. He wasn't even 24 hours old yet. And something told me to wind up that music box. So I put it right next to his ear
Yeah.
on the changing table. That baby immediately stopped crying. Immediately. What was going on there?
Well, I think partially what's happening, and it has, if you think about mantras, it kind of has the same effect, is that your mind is totally consumed in the process of listening. There we are listening again. And so your thoughts, I know maybe it seems hard that a baby would have thoughts, but they do. They're like, I feel hungry. I feel tired. I feel insecure or whatever. When you hear music, you stop those sensations and you're totally focused on the music. And then the vibrations are comforting. It's such a comfort to feel that, especially, if it's a little interesting music or it's soft or gentle. There's a musical theory for musical therapy, and it's called entrainment. And we have a biofield and biorhythms, and our biorhythms, like our heartbeat, will adjust to a musical rhythm and a musical feeling. So in music therapy, we will use entrainment where we're like, okay, if this person has a lot of anxiety, we're going to do something with a slower rhythm. And literally there's a synchronization of the biorhythm of the heart and the rhythm of the music. And it's called entrainment, and it's synchronization. So your body, all your biorhythms, your biofield, every energy becomes in tune with those vibrations.
Interesting. Well, another example, and he's going to be mortified when he hears I'm talking about him this much in this show, in this episode. But anyways.
You talk about your Jonathan.
I know. So it comes to mind, he's a toddler, and it's the Grammys are on TV, and I'm fixing dinner, and our family room was right next door, right, like I could see him while I was fixing dinner, and he's playing with his little toys, and Guns N' Roses or somebody was on, and they were performing. And then Placido Domingo came in, and he sang something, some opera, something.
Yes.
That baby, who had just learned to walk, went and stood in front of the television and did not move for the whole song of that opera piece.
Wow.
And I thought, whoa, what is that? And so we started playing classical music every night at dinner. I thought, okay, we can do this. And then not too long after that, because he was talking in sentences before he was 2, we were down at SeaWorld and they play classical music, and my parents were with us, and he's in a stroller like of a dolphin or something that you read when you're there, and we're walking around and he's saying, hey, Mommy, that's Vivaldi or that's whoever. And it was because we were playing classical music at dinner and he knew who the composers were. That still blows my mind that a baby that small, that a child that small can recognize that stuff. What's going on there?
I have to say, I just think that speaks to the power of music and like this amazing process that goes on in your brain. And, you use your left and your right with music because you're using the analytical, like, oh, it's going up, it's going down. And you're using the right, which is creative. Wow, it's painting this beautiful picture. And that crossover develops your brain in a specific way. And I think just the power of music, you said it, it's powerful that you hear something beautiful like Vivaldi and you remember it's by Vivaldi.
Mm-hmm.
It's that powerful that our brain wants that. It wants to latch on to it and it's elevating. And so it takes it.
Mm-hmm. And then we take it a step further, and I think it connects us to our spiritual gifts, our spiritual abilities, and all of that. So to me, it's a gateway.
It's a gateway. I love that, Julie.
Yeah. I think so too. All right, let's change directions for a couple of minutes. I could talk to you for hours, but I got lots more questions, but I'll wind it down here in a minute. Do you come from a spiritual family? You mentioned that your grandfather visited you in a dream when you were 12, but were you seeing dead people as a little kid? Tell us about that.
Well, not really, but my family was reverent, but they stopped going to church. I was the youngest of 7, and it was too much to keep taking 7 kids to church. But when I was about 8, I had a friend, and we would do make believe, like, let's play house, let's play office, let's play school. And one day she said, let's play church. And I was like, this is so exciting. I've always wanted to know what you do when you go to church. And so we played church, and I loved it. And I asked her mom, can I go to church with you? And she said, well, maybe, but we're Catholic and you're Episcopalian. So let's see if we can find an Episcopalian family to take you to church. And we did. And I started going to church by myself with this other family. And I loved it. And I took the confirmation classes, and it was time to be confirmed. The priest said, well, I'm very sorry, but we can't confirm you because you're not baptized. And I was so sad. And I was like, well, can I get baptized? So at 10 years old, I kind of arranged for my own baptism and confirmation. And my family came in for it. It was a big event. And then the family story was, well, Margaret's gone and got herself baptized. But it was kind of always my kind of bringing in the spirituality into my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then most girls have read the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, by Judy Blume. And of course, it came out when I was about 10, is when it came out. And I read this book and I was so taken. I was like, if this girl, Margaret, can write and talk to God, so can I. And that kind of started that whole process of me being in meditation and writing, and just kind of brought, but that was kind of how all that started. And then I had a dream with the grandpa.
So when you started communicating with Evan, after he passed, did you share it with your family? Did you kind of, stay undercover about it? What did you do along those lines?
I did little by little. I kind of, said, well, I feel like Evan told me this. And they were very, well, that's so nice. That's very, very nice. That's nice. And then, as it got a little bit more complicated with the EVPs, they're like, well, if you say so, then maybe that's what's happening. And the more I shared it, the more there was like, well, I don't know how that could have possibly happened with the validations and things like that. And so now they're just kind of like, well, what do you think Dad thinks about this? Can you let us know? What does Dad think about this?
So now you're the resident medium in the family.
Part of, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, that's all right.
But mostly it's just, all in fun. And I do think it has this power of connection.
Yeah. Well, and I think every culture has had mediums. Every culture has been able to communicate with spirit. And you got the cultures that read the tea leaves, and you got the whatever, however they do it. And certainly every religion and every spiritual every spiritual tradition is, you pray. Well, what's praying? You're talking to spirit. It's not like Jesus is sitting next to you on that couch. It's, his spirit. You're talking to Jesus' spirit. And every once in a while, I'll run into somebody who will say, oh, that's evil. That's just the devil or whatever. And my church doesn't believe in that. And so I say, well, one of the biggest religions in the world is Catholicism. And Pope Francis in 2016 issued a papal bull, which is kind of like a newsletter coming out of the Vatican. And he said that he wanted his pastors around the world to welcome mediums and psychics and healers because they were doing the work of the Holy Spirit. And when I tell people that and I send them a link, of that papal bulletin,
oh my gosh,
whoa, I didn't know about that. And my parish priest gives a copy of my book to everybody that comes in to plan a funeral. And there are many churches and synagogues throughout the U.S. that use my book in the same way, because I'll hear from them. They'll say, can we have $100, at a discounted rate? Because they're telling me what they're doing with them, which is such an honor for me. But I think what we're doing, and I'd love to hear what your take on this is I think we're moving away from you have to believe this and do this, this, and this as part of the dogma of religion. And religion is back to what I said earlier. It's a gateway to help us develop our spirituality. And so what I'm seeing is that people are, they're religious. They go to church. A lot of people, I go to church.
Right.
But I don't buy everything they say. It's like the buffet of psychicness for me. I take what resonates with me. And if it doesn't, then I leave it. And also what it does is it helps enhance my spirituality. Are you finding the same thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that what we all can benefit from is the mindfulness and the intention of pure benefit. And to me, that's what this is all about. Everything we do is opening our awareness because, the Creator is good. Everything in this world has the potential to be good and great. And if we can all just lift our spirits towards that, we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, winding down here, a couple more questions. Tell us about your book and tell us about how you help families who are grieving the loss of loved one, especially children, especially a child.
Yeah. Well, when Evan was alive, I wrote a book called Uncommon Beauty, Crisis Parenting from Day One. And it's a book with about 100 essays, very short, like 1 to 3 pages, because I wanted to help parents of special needs, medically fragile children. And I knew that what they needed were short, concise, little tidbits, tips to help them get through little unknown situations. So, and that book did really well. And I think I ended up giving a lot of them away to hospitals, to the NICUs, and to parent organizations. And I still have parents coming to me today who say that that book was extremely helpful to them in the NICU or when they first started. And so now I'm still feeling that kind of push to help parents, but mostly parents who have suffered the loss of a child. So I'm offering one-to-one grief and wellness coaching because I really feel like a big part of grief is finding your own wellness. And the first and most important thing I think when people are grieving is just to be heard, to be able to tell their story, to share all those experiences that they're going through. And it's very hard to do it with anybody but someone who's been through it. And I just have had a passion from the very beginning of supporting other parents in that way. And so I've gotten some training in that. I've gone through grief education certification with David Kessler. And I'm currently finishing up some wellness life coaching with Deepak Chopra, just so that I can have the most skills possible to support anybody who would find me to help them through this most difficult challenge of their lifetime. And so I incorporate the grief education, the wellness, the Jin Shinjutsu, which we can help ourselves with very easily and very efficiently for all kinds of things, from headaches to stomach aches to sadness to anxiety, with very simple self-help like acupressure. And then offering a place to talk safely about life after death and just communicating with spirit and continuing that relationship of love with your child, because that will never end.
We had Dr. Lenora Matthew on the show, and she has done research that shows that being able to communicate with your child in heaven or another deceased loved one is really the most effective way to help with grieving. Have you found that to be the case as well?
Yes. That's just been an amazing component to find that I have the hope that I can still be in touch with Evan on some level and that we'll find each other again. And that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with the work that I'm doing with parents. And people can find me at exhalinggrief.com, because in Jin Shinjutsu, it's all about exhaling. And I just really hope that anyone who needs that kind of support can find the help that they're looking for.
And I know that you've been involved in helping parents heal as well, as I have. I'll be speaking at their conference again here this summer. And I know you've been helping other parents who've lost a child, especially early in their early phases of grieving, which at that point, I've talked to so many parents who've lost a child, and they just say, I just didn't think I was going to be able to survive. I didn't think my life would go on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're living proof that it does.
Yeah. It's been an 11-year journey, and it's still evolving. I will just say that. But there's a lot to explore and a lot to learn. And Evan is my leader.
Yeah. How wonderful. Well, which goes into my last question. Why do we incarnate?
I really believe that we incarnate to learn things, to evolve. And I love this idea that there might be soul groups, like we kind of decide with each other. And I just have this feeling that Evan and I, before we incarnated, decided that he would need to learn the lessons of a really enthusiastic, cheerful, brilliant child inside a body that had some challenges. And I would be a mom who needed to learn about music and caregiving and loss. And together we're evolving.
Continuing to evolve.
Right.
With him in heaven and you here.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. You are so extraordinary. I just love and adore you. You are, as I mentioned, you're one of my favorite people, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to share your wisdom and your experiences through all these multitudes of different life experiences that you've been through with all of us today. I know this conversation is going to help a lot of people. So thank you for doing that. Once again, please tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, how they can find your book, find your services, all that kind of stuff.
They can find everything at exhalinggrief.com.
Exhalinggrief.com. We'll have that in the show notes too.
Okay.
Yeah, great. All righty, everybody. That's it for today. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, and from Wisconsin too, where Margaret is. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.